For this project, an airbrush was used to apply the black primer and a zenithal spray of white ink. The rest of the work on this miniature I did with a brush, beginning with an undersketch of white acrylic to help the speed paints that I'll use next. My intention is for the main light source to come from the goblin's upper left shoulder from the goblin's perspective, putting his lower right side in the dark. I put some of these white highlights on the right side of the body, but sparingly and not in the shadows. This is pretty easy to keep up with, as I planned on these highlights to be added like this during the zenithal spray, so the brushwork is really only adding brighter spots to the bright areas already on the miniature. And once I'm finished with that, I do it again, covering significantly less area and adding only to where the light source would touch directly, just to add a little more brightness. At this point, the time spent so far for assembly and mold line cleaning took about an hour, and the airbrush work took about 15 minutes. This manual white highlighting took about an hour by itself. I moved to the speed paints to block in the vast majority of the details. I tried to keep this as clean and accurate as possible, but mistakes happened and I used the previous white to make fixes as needed. Altogether, it took about 2 hours to finish. I tried to keep the colors to a minimum, using the same red on the coat as on the squig, or the same green on the goblin as on the small tree's greenery, to save both space on my palette and to avoid having multiple shades of the same colors, at least in this early stage of the work. For the metallics, I use a gold and silver speed paint, and then I add shining silver as an edge highlight to everything metal, before I clean out my water cup thoroughly to remove any metallic flakes, as I'm done using metallic paint for the rest of this project and I don't want the flakes to contaminate the other colors. I decided that next I would do an oil wash, as I've been apt to do recently, and I mixed some colors on a palette and thinned them down with some mineral spirits. I mixed a dark purple from French ultramarine and cadmium red deep hue, a bluish gray mix from ivory black, French ultramarine and titanium white, a dark red mix from ivory black and cadmium deep red hue, a dark brown mix from ivory black and burnt sienna, and finally just ivory black for my black wash. I let these set for about 45 minutes before I buff off the majority of the oil using a makeup sponge lightly moistened with mineral spirits, and then I let it set overnight to set up. The next day I start building up acrylic layer highlights, starting with magenta between the lighter areas and darker areas of the squig body. A mix of primary and fluorescent reds are added as a minor highlight, mostly where the direct light would hit the squig's body. The final highlight I put on the squig is with fluorescent red, and this is applied sparingly and with very minute lines or stippling. For the coat, I follow a similar approach, starting with a mix of black and red to create a middle color between the lighter red and darker recesses created by the speed paints and oil wash. I wanted the squig flesh to be more eye-catching and colorful, so I only added one highlight of primary red. Though the squig and the coat started with the same colors, these highlights and shades will allow them to stand apart, while remaining close enough as to not be distracting, as well as set them apart from being made of the same material. For the greens, I stick to the same format, using emerald green to bridge the gap between the darkest and lightest areas of the skin. The rest of the details, such as the Christmas lights, dynamite stick, the smoke, boots, and pants, are all completed in the same manner, so I'm not going to show everything, as it'll help reduce the length of this video, and it's all following the same steps. Finally, I finished painting with some inks to bring up the vibrancy a little, especially on the squig and the goblin skin. I did a quick base off camera, slapping it with AK Interactive snow texture mixed with some water before immediately sprinkling on snow micro balloons. Once dried and set, I glued a little bit of flocking and a few tufts using PVA glue, and finally I dabbed a little bit more of the AK Interactive snow texture on the tufts and a little on the flocking to build up a little slush, and then I finally got to call it a night. And this is where I stopped with this miniature. I have about 9.5 hours into assembling and painting it, and I'm happy with the result. I like how the squig came out, particularly how vibrant the skin and gums are. For the lights, I do intend on trying to do a very small amount of OSL with an airbrush once I'm not sick, so I consider them unfinished as of yet. For lessons learned, the white fur did not come out like I wanted, so I may glaze some transparent blue ink over it to saturate it a little, and then I'll add white highlights over top again. I also learned that with this miniature it's kind of a sign of dark days ahead, as I plan on painting up another 40k faction next year. I haven't decided which for sure, but it'll likely be something wicked and, like this miniature, rife with a lot of small intricate details that I have a feeling will make me hate my life for at least a while. And that'll bring this video and my voice to its end. I hope you learned something or inspired to start your own collection of boys, or at the very least, ride into your enemies while mounted upon an adorable slavering murder beast. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until the next video, where hopefully my voice isn't going to die.